Radio.
News, opinion, and a little irreverence from both sides of the 49th parallel. This is Americanuck Radio with Mike Phillip.
Welcome back to the second hour of Americanuck Radio. I am the Americanuck Mike Phillip, coming at you live from Western Canada, a place called Alberta, a place that's close to my heart. I love Alberta. In fact, I don't in any way really identify with being a Canadian. I'm an Albertan, and I'm an American. That's literally how I look at it. When I became a certain age, I decided to become an American. And a lot of people that call themselves American just because they were born on a patch of dirt are the most un-American people that you will ever meet. Now, skipping across the pond, we've got the Brexit movement happening in England. You've got people wanting out of the EU. Well, it's a similar situation here in Canada. The province of Alberta is experiencing economic hardship on a scale that's going to be difficult for people to imagine. We're going to get into it in this segment. All of our listeners that are calling in where the phone lines are loading up, stay where you are. Ken, Theo, everybody on the phone lines, stick around. We're going to get to you to get your questions and comments in. We're joined by Dave Bjorkman, who's the interim leader of the Alberta Independence Party. He was joining in the first hour with our discussion with Ray Bolger. Head over to AmericanuckRadio.com and buy the book, Operation Devil Horns. But Dave, you've been in this game for quite a while. I have done shows in the past on the possibility of Alberta becoming an independent republic, the possibility of statehood. You are a policy wonk and a specialist in this area, and that's why I was really looking forward to getting you on this show, because you know the insides and the outsides on this issue better than I do. The shows that we've done in the past on it have been full of opinion, hyperbole, and somewhat sophomoric. So with that, Dave, the phone lines are loading up, I'm telling you. Ken, Cheryl, Theo, stay where you are. Pamela. Dave, introduce yourself and what got you down this road of Alberta independence?
Hi, thank you, Mike. I got into the separation. I've always been pro-Alberta. I'm a fifth-generation Albertan. My family shared. They were a farming family, trade family. Got into some successful business in the early 30s. What pushed me into it is just the stories of growing up and all of what we're experiencing right now and soon to really feel in Alberta has happened reoccurring in Alberta at least 8 times. One of those times, believe it or not, 4 times as bad as the 80s and that much longer lasting was the 30s. And I had followed conservative politics. I've looked at all of them, NDP, Liberal. I've learned everybody's policies and platforms. Social credit was a big thing for me. The Reform Party, Alliance, early Stephen Harper was a big mentor to me. And with Alliance, we had another lawyer there, and he's running the parental choice now. He's conservative, but these men were just great men, and there's many of them in Alberta. But Brian Jean lost the leadership race, and that's what pushed me towards this. I'd had enough. I was tired of the conservative liberal narrative. I'm tired of international law, the law not applying to Alberta, and I'm going to get into all that, but go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is something that I've seen just take off in the last little while, and the only metric that I really have to go by is activity on Twitter, on Facebook, and social media, and mentions of it. Now, with the media situation being what it is in Canada, folks, Americanuck Radio is just about the only place you're going to hear this from a Canadian perspective or an Albertan perspective. and we want to get to some of these. Should we take some calls, Dave? People are waiting.
Sure.
Let's take some calls. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left in this segment. Ken in Alberta's been hanging on. Ken, get your point or your question out fairly quick so we can move on to Theo, Cheryl, and Pamela. Ken, you're live on Americanuck Radio. What are your comments or questions for Dave?
Well, Dave, how you doing?
Hi, Ken. How are you?
I'm fair. I'm disappointed as hell with the way the Alberta's progressed or not progressed with getting rid of oil, selling oil. This has been a long, ongoing thing for as long as I've been alive. I'd like to say it was just the Liberals doing it, but it isn't. Back a long time ago when we had Ralph Klein in power, how come we never had the pipelines put in then? Why is it all just now?
Okay, Ken, I'm going to answer that because we'll do one question at a time. The issue with the pipelines goes way back 1957. The reason why nothing moves Alberta, and it never will, is because Ottawa goes to 1957. I got to be quick here. It's equalization. Yep. Equalization is the reason. It's a federal narrative for us to pay a tribute to Ottawa. It's centralization to Quebec, and that's why we're at where we're at, and it will never change.
Then we got to go somewhere else. Okay, that we've been treated like garbage since the beginning. We've always been the second or third or fourth choice for Canada. I say it's time to get the hell out, get the Republic of Alberta going. You know what? 20 years ago, if you'd asked me this, Dave, I'd have said not a chance. Now I'm saying that's the only way we're going to make it. It's the only way we're going to make it. Like we're sitting on a gold mine, and with huge unemployment, and it, like you said, it's just begun. It's absolutely a travesty what they're doing. One other thing too with the Liberals, I keep saying Liberals, but it's like the Liberals have changed their ideology. Like they're not. It's like they don't want to help Canada. Back in the old days, I think they pretended that they wanted to. Now they don't. It's
globalization. Globalization.
Yeah. What is globalization? If you look at the definition of the conservative and the definition of the liberal, what has globalization got to do with it? It's got nothing. That's a new ideology. That's a new thing that they've incorporated into their
last 15 years.
Platform.
It's France and China. I'm going to get into it. Ken, if you let me in the next segment, I'm definitely going to break it all down for everybody.
Ken, thank you for your call. We're going to let you go and move on. We've only got 2 minutes left. Everybody on the phone line, stay where you are. We're going to get to you after this segment. Ken brings up a great point. I mean, listen, and I've said this before because Albertans, in my experience, I've always thought the good times are going to roll, and because we got oil under our feet, and I point out to them, your average African has diamonds under their feet, and they're broke. Now, the other point that Ken made is the relationship between Alberta and Canada has been kind of like a pimp and a prostitute putting out cigarette butts on her and saying, "Give me my money, bitch."
Since 1905, date of our confederation.
Exactly. And so, I mean, the other thing, too, with blocking pipelines or blocking Alberta from exporting its chief product, that there's a word for that, and that's a trade embargo. That's an actual act of war and flies in the face of the agreement for confederation.
We have this trade embargo, if you want to call it, and that's actually what it is.
That is what it is.
And the reason why Confederated Canada does this is for equalization. Quebec they take substantial amount in equalization. They're not even the highest, you guys. There's small provinces that per person per capita take way more in Quebec. But that being said, those billions that go to Quebec, if they do an upgrade or they start shipping our oil out, guess what happens? They don't make a damn dollar. Those Quebec will get reduced equalization, meaning that none of it counted, right? It's a plus and minus. So they will never support us. This is why the socialism continues and why Alberta is the way it is.
Excellent answer, and it's, you know, I remember you were talked about the 80s. I remember people had T-shirts that said, "Please, Lord, one more oil boom. I promise I won't piss it away," with a picture of a pump jack with a spider web on it. I know people right now that are talking about going and getting their papers together so they can move to Texas because Alberta has the most talented oil field personnel on the planet. We're going to lose that talent. We're going to have a brain drain, and then what? Bring in a bunch of immigrants that are going to freeze in the dark dark because there's no jobs?
That's exactly what they plan to do.
I hear the music. We got to go to a break. Hey, everybody on the phone lines, we're going to get to you after these commercials. Dave Bjorkman of the Alberta Independence Party on Americanuck Radio. Bjorkman, not son.
I'm Alberta bound. This piece of heaven that I found. Rocky mountains and black fertile ground. Everything I need beneath that big blue sky.
Americanuck Radio.
Where I go, this place will always be my home. I have been Alberta bound for all my life. And I'll be Alberta bound till I die.
Welcome back to Americanuck Radio. This is your host, the Americanuck, Mike Phillip, coming at you live from, you guessed it, Alberta. One of the best places on the planet, but it's slowly circling the drain under Ottawa and UN policy. We've got Justin Trudeau looking to sign the UN Compact on immigration this month. A lot of people have a serious sense of dread about that situation. Once again, we're joined by Dave Bjorkman of the Alberta Independence Party. I want to rifle through these calls here, so have your points and questions ready to go for Dave, and then we're going to get into some policy after we take your calls. Theo in Alberta, you're live on Americanuck Radio.
Hello.
Hi, Theo, how are you?
Hi.
Hi, Theo. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. So, if Alberta should be a separate country, what plan would be in place to invest in the economy to create jobs for everyone?
Great question. The actual investment will come with the UN and the Security Council. There's a little well-known fact in the UN, but the general population doesn't understand, Theo, that within 2 years, if we go to the Security Council, which is made up of the USA, Russia, France, UK, and China, if we go to those five and we tell them our plight as a landlocked nation, we automatically get tidewater access through all provinces in Canada, because Canada has actually signed on this ratified agreement. Now, once that happens, all pipelines have to go. We see this in over 50 landlocked nations across the world right now, and they can only charge us cost, maintenance, and security of pipelines and ports to sea. And when you have all five Security Council members, that is international law. And this is what I've had a very hard time with getting out to the world, basically, right? But this is fact. You can talk to any one of the five Security Council members. These are our allies from World War II. They are the UN. Everything we hear about all these other things of the UN, we'll hear other treaties or sub-councils with really fancy names. None of them are legal, but that is our path forward, and the economy will flow fast. It will be 10 times what we have going on in Canada right now, which has the legal means of oppression to keep our economy down, because the entire world cannot stand against them, because we don't fall into international law, and that's just the reality.
Okay, good. Now, what exactly would our immigration policy be like?
I believe, I mean, we haven't formulated our policies on immigration yet. I personally believe, and I'm sure the party shares this, and it's common sense, it is a tap, Theo. It is a tap that we open as we need. When the demand for people is there, you cannot throw an arbitrary number out there like 250,000 or 1 million. If you look at the actual UN Charter and the Declaration of Human Rights signed in 1948 after World War II, it very much matches our Constitution here in Canada and our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but the Allies designed it, and it was set like this, that immigration was to only be effective if if you had the demand, meaning our unemployment, which that means nationally, each nation, a member of the UN, they have a whole article on unemployment. If you don't have the people of that nation happy with employment, because they say that's a law, a fundamental right. You have a right to be employed, a right to run a business and be successful. And if your nation turns on you and says, oh, it's okay, we're going to have higher levels of unemployment and arbitrarily bring people in, that's against the UN Security Council. It's against the Human Declaration of Rights.
To say the least.
Yeah.
100%, Theo. We are slaves to the clock, my friend. Thank you for the great questions. We've got to move on. Let's head over to Cheryl. She wants to know about plans for the education and system in Alberta. Cheryl, you're live. What are your questions for Mr. Bjorkman?
Hi. I was going to ask about education, but I'm sitting here with my family who are all tradespeople, and we're actually curious about what his plan on getting resources to market are.
I just kind of answered that, Cheryl, with Theo, and that is joining the UN. We separate, we join the UN, and then this is guaranteed. They say 2 years. I want to do a 4-year transfer plan, and there's a reason for that I can go into later in this segment. But with the UN, and it is the Landlocked Nations Agreement that actually the U.S. wrote. All 47 companies that are members of 50 in the world actually wrote this, and they're all American. And the Security Council, all 5 members ratified. Russia ratified, China, UK, France, and the USA, and as well as Canada. So they're held to it. Canada didn't care before because they are a tidewater country, and they can oppress, by signing on to that, they can oppress any province, territory that's landlocked, and there's nothing we can do about it, and the world cannot interfere because that international law signed doesn't give us any power. However, we separate from Canada. We become a landlocked country. As everybody said, that was a bad idea. It's not. We sign on with the UN Security Council, only the 2 1948 treaties and the Declaration of Human Rights, and we're guaranteed these things. We get all, and then of course we signed on the Landlocked Nations Treaty, but we automatically get pipeline access across country, northwest, south, all the way north, and as well we have the US. We won't get tidewater access because there's also the law of the sea, which the only UN Security Council member that didn't sign was US, but we don't need sea access in the USA. We just need access to their states, any which one we want.
100%. Well said. Yeah.
Thank
so,
you,
I mean, these strange, we're going to let you go, Cheryl. Thanks for your call. Appreciate it. We've got more to get on to, but I did have a question from one of our American listeners in the chat room. Dave in Washington, D.C., wants to know about the equalization deal. Can you explain that to our American listening audience?
Oh, yes. Great question, Dave. Here's the issue. 1957, okay, it was 9 years after World War II, and we signed on the Declaration of Human Rights with the UN, which was created by the USA. USA led the UN. That was in San Francisco, but equalization came 9 years later, and here's what happened, okay? We hit a jackpot oil reserve in Leduc, Alberta, and that was in the early 50s. And of course, Alberta, for the first time in almost 60 years, we grew out of poverty, vast poverty. You wouldn't believe what a Alberta farmer lived like, over those 60 years. It would blow you away. But going on to that, we had... oh, geez, I'm running out of time here.
Yeah, we're slaves to the clock.
I have to get back to this.
Listen, let's pick it up after this break. We've got other calls, but there's a lot that you want to get into. We've got 2 segments left. Alberta Independence with Dave Bjorkman on Americanuck Radio. The call-in line is 855-660-4261. Americanuck Radio on the Genesis Communications Network.
All right. This is Americanuck Radio, and if you're listening, you've probably noticed that the voice of Mike Phillip has changed. That's because it's not Mike Phillip. This is producer Super Don. We're having some technical difficulties, as does happen in live radio. Hey, you're back.
We're back.
Sorry,
it's So let's start this segment over all over again.
Ready, go.
Americanuck Radio.
But I hear tell about a heaven in Alberta where they've got all hell for a basement.
Welcome back to Americanuck Radio. I believe that our illustrious producer, Super Don Naylor, did a great job of covering for me, but I couldn't hear what was going on. And here's what actually happened, you guys. I looked out the window, and Justin Trudeau had a ladder, and he was climbing the power pole to my cable connection, and he had a saw. And so we were able to get another crew out here to reconnect and kick his well-socked ass. And
Did you see what kind of socks he was wearing? I'm just curious.
Well,
Are they Christmas socks?
It was so bright and glaring that I assumed that was what was going on, because nobody has socks that loud. So before the break, Dave, you started out talking about this whole equalization thing, explaining it to an American, how it's completely drained Alberta. I mentioned this relationship, like I said, like a pimp and a prostitute, putting out cigarette butts on Alberta. Give me my money. And that's what it's been this whole time. And you had a few more things that you wanted to get into with that, Dave.
Yes, let's hit equalization. So 1957, Alberta was building up for about 6 years from Leduc Oil, and we're coming on pretty strong. And of course, you know, like the Soviet Union with centralization, Ottawa wanted their cake too, and to create this equalization formula of a sharing, right? Sharing the rewards, and as wages rose in Alberta, as Albertans came out of that farming poverty, right? They wanted their slice, and initially it was okay, and it wasn't too bad, and Alberta even participated, although not much, but as time goes on, and as Alberta started to really come on strong with the oil industry, there were tweaks with Ottawa and Quebec, and every 5 years, they renew it, and they started adding, okay, now we're going to add a formula because Albertans are making more money on the wage. So we're going to change that, so anyone who makes this amount of money an hour will pay this much into equalization, and it will disappear from Alberta. Those taxes collected, no services or infrastructure will come back. Then they started saying, hey, now we got to look at which provinces have natural resources, which don't. And when I say natural resources out of the ground, solar, this is why you see solar, wind, and all this other hooey that doesn't really produce its capacity, but that doesn't qualify. Like hydro, it doesn't qualify for equalization. Resources like coal, anything that has a consumption value where you consume it and it's gone, non-renewable, they will tax you and take that money and give it out to the rest of Canada, depending on who needs it that they deem, and we never see that money again. You know, and that's what's going on. It's $21 billion to equalization that we pay in and we never see again. That was just this year. It's been going on every year, $280 billion in the last 15, because, like I said, every 5 years they change this formula. On the other side of that, we also pay federal taxes, and there's another $20.3 billion a year, almost the same size as equalization, that goes into the pot and never comes back to Alberta. It's paid out as Justin Trudeau, Stephen Harper. You can go back. It doesn't matter which one. They see how it's fit. That's dispersed. It does not come back to Alberta in any kind of direct investment on our public works or anything else.
Well, okay, so Dave, give me one example, just one example of a benefit that Alberta gets from being part of a confederation with the rest of Canada.
Honestly, we do get a benefit. We pay, as of 2018, July, we paid $50.3 billion into federal taxes, all sources. That's businesses, the people, foreign business, whatever. That's all the federal taxes collected. Over $41 billion. I
don't know how that's a benefit.
No, but what we do, we get 7.7 out of the 50.3. We got 7.7 billion back for healthcare, and less than $2 billion in services and infrastructure from the federal government. That's it.
I still don't think that's a benefit. I mean, the healthcare system that we have that everybody calls free, those guys don't even know how to cure heartburn. I mean, they're great if you get shot, stabbed, run over by a meat packer or whatever, right? They're good at trauma. And, you know, in the United States with their model, if you have an accident and you don't have insurance, which could run $800 or $900 a month, you're screwed. So, I mean, it's maybe a little better, but at the same time, we're not given our choice of health care. All we've got access to is allopathic reductionism. So, again, it's kind of a communist healthcare system.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective, $7.7 billion. Everybody gets health transfers with their own federal taxes anyway. So in effect, Alberta's paying everybody else's police, health. Our provincial government, when we talk about provincial taxes collected, you can look at the last budget. We were $8.5 billion over. This is Alberta taxes collected. 56 or almost 57 billion was our expenses. Our revenues were, I think, 48 billion, and almost half of that was the healthcare expense Alberta pays, to over $24 billion as for healthcare. So 7.7 is really just a fifth of that, not even.
In the time we've got left, Dave, we've done shows on the past with very little knowledge on the subject, but the possibility of Alberta joining the U.S. and becoming a state. What are the ins and outs with that in the few minutes we've got left, and why do you think it's feasible or not?
It's not, okay. I'm going to explain something to people. Joining the USA comes with an over $300 billion price tag, and I want Americans to know that too. That
how much?
It's not $300 billion.
$300 billion?
That's what it would cost, and this is why.
So that's what we paid in transfer payments to Ottawa.
Well, we'd have to pay that to the states because they're.
Front.
Well, no, we could do payments maybe,
okay.
But it wouldn't matter Trump, Democrat, or whatever. Here's the issue: since that wartime, we got a free pass to join the U.S. Everybody knows about that. Unfortunately, to do that, since 1948, from the war and the Cold War, the U.S. has pumped trillions upon trillions of dollars into military service, GDP, infrastructure. Those are assets. Physical. Alberta can't just jump in and get that free handout. You gotta pay. Our portion, $300 billion, and there's a healthcare changeover too, right? It's not feasible. It's our third option.
You were saying that George W. Bush actually met with Ralph Klein, the former premier of Alberta, and they discussed the issue.
Oh yes. This is going back a number of years. This is right around the time of Harper and the firewall. But I was fortunate, a young man, and I got invited to a little pub on Saskatchewan Drive. Some people will be familiar with the train outside and the old tracks, but yeah, met George Jr. He was governor of Texas at the time, and Ralph Klein, and then they went through this, and Ralph's hard stance, but Ralph had fixed Alberta as best he could and took the money away. He never privatized ATB, which is the only bank we need for separation. We have to have the ATB.
Okay, so I have to ask, out of Ralph Klein and George W. Bush, who drank who under the table?
Oh, Ralph drank him under the table.
I knew it, man.
Yeah.
It's because he was drinking that crappy American beer, and then he came up here and he got walloped upside the head with some 5-6%.
Yeah, I don't even think he had already quit drinking by that point. I believe. I think I don't even know, probably non-alcoholic or whatever, right? Ralphie was drinking. They weren't bombed though, but I mean George didn't drink at that time. I think he'd already given it up.
Oh, okay.
And went with God. But I mean, he was great to talk to. He was definitely all there.
I hear the music, and that means we're in for another commercial break. Nobody likes commercials, but they're necessary. They keep the lights on and pay somebody's bills, not mine. Dave Bjorkman of the Alberta Independence Party, Pamela, Lori, John Martin in Alberta. Stay where you are. We'll get to your calls in the fourth and last segment of this interview on Americanuck Radio. And it's going so well, we're going to do this on a regular basis. Flesh out this Alberta separation thing.
Americanuck Radio.
Welcome back to Americanuck Radio, everybody. couple things that I want Dave to hit on very quickly before we take your calls. Pamela, John, Lori, we're going to get to you. Just give us a second here, because people in the chat room have been saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're saying that our path to independence lies with the UN. I thought the UN was the problem. People are sensing a disconnect. And then I want you to talk a little bit about education, because our education system is kind of a mess, if you ask. Well, big mess, if you ask me. But those two things, and then let's jump to calls. First of all, path to independence through the UN. What are you talking about, Dave?
Okay, thank you, Mike, and all of you listening, and the Americans on the room. I want you to understand the UN is not the problem. We're all being tricked. There is only one Security Council, the UN, that is international law. These are 5 countries that must come together to ratify any treaty, any agreement. I'm telling you all right now, the Human Rights Council is not the Declaration of Human Rights. It's a sub-council that does not have all 5 founding members of the Security Council on board. And when you don't have all 5, you don't have a legal framework. It's not international law. The things we're seeing Justin Trudeau jump on, we saw Obama jump on, and sometimes there's Republicans and conservatives jumped on this stuff too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in Canada, definitely all conservative governments jump on these non-binding Human Rights Council. Then there's a whole pile of councils, guys, led by France, China, the heavy socialists, but they never got ratified by all 5 members. If the US, Russia, China, UK, and France don't all 5 sign on, and even with that, if your country doesn't sign on and ratify as well, it's not legally binding. So when we get these councils, these sub-councils where you have China and others, but not all 5, it's not legally binding. It's baloney. It is sales pitch from your government who's been corrupted. That is the absolute truth.
Give us a really brief outline of the Alberta Independence Party's policies on education, and then let's head over to the phone lines, Dave.
Very simple. Even with the UN, we find in that Declaration of Human Rights a whole article, and they give the above God clause on education and parental rights. That means that is the ultimate right of a man, woman, a couple, right, to get together and decide to have children. You have the absolute rights over your child's education before God, government, or anything. And that's in that declaration.
I actually like that. Let's head over to the phone lines. Pamela in Alberta. Now listen, as I take your calls, you're going to have to make your point or your question fairly quickly in order for me to get to all of you. And don't have your radio or any sound from the show going in the background. That's Talk Radio 101. Pam in Alberta wants to talk separation. You're live on Americanuck Radio, Pamela.
Hey there. Quickly, logistics. What about, well, you covered the landlocked thing, but how do we know for a fact the UN is going to recognize Alberta as an independent nation? But more than that, standing army, police force, money. What do we do there? Like you said, Treasury branch, that's fine, but what do we do?
Excellent question, okay. Dave.
Thank you so much, Palman. You hit a lot of topics there, so I might have to remind you. But first, you said, how do we know the UN will sign on with us? Is because they've already ratified the Landlocked Nations Agreement. They would give Alberta, they would support us. We have the window of 21, and if we wait, then we have to wait all the way to 2026. There's only 2 windows, so we're really pressured 2 years. Second question you had was our military, which the Alberta Independence Party will push forward a $2.75 billion. And when we calculated this in our budget with still our $15 billion surplus at serious tax reforms that will go to the military over the course of a 4-year negotiated transfer, meaning 30,000 Alberta troops, all all the military, but it's 6.27% of the requirement of NATO, which is 3 times what Donald Trump is even asking for. But that's what we can do. Police force, Federation of Police, Alberta-wide. It's already here. It's already set up. The municipalities and a few small communities use it. We would implement that right across. That's 2.2 times cheaper than anything we got now.
So would you kick out the RCMP, being that they're a foreign?
Yeah, we wouldn't. We're not kicking out, like, and you guys, you don't even want to know what happened to me on this issue in Beaumont doing a piece on a public, and the RCMP came there and grabbed me. I'm going to be quick here, but it's all good. We worked it out, but they weren't too happy about that, and they needed to know what I was talking about. I'm not talking about throwing citizens out. RCMP would just switch over. Same with sheriffs. You're just going to switch over and get another defined role.
Different patch on your uniform.
Yeah,
basically.
That's it. Changing coveralls will work. We all do that in the oil patch. This company's out. Well, guess what? You're wearing a new pair of coveralls next day. It didn't even affect you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a really good answer, and it's nuanced too, because what are you gonna take somebody that grew up in Alberta and they're an RCMP member and just kick their ass out? You can't do that.
No, our citizens are with us. We have a plan and a real working platform.
Exactly. And I'll tell you what, an Alberta Army would be badass. I've met some pretty damn tough boys in this province here. No joke. Working in the oil patch.
We have the infrastructure. That means getting rid of the leased army, which is... Here's another point. Are you still there, Pamela?
Yep.
Oh, okay. The other point was we lease in Suffield the UK Army. That's the Western Army. Alberta pays for all that infrastructure. It's for 4 provinces. Alberta pays for it. That sits here. We're leasing all that UK equipment. We're talking big. They could level Calgary right now. They could roll out tanks, level Calgary in a heartbeat. But we're leasing all that, and we got to get rid of that and build our own. And after 4-year transfer, we'd be $11 billion. It can be done. There's much local procurement. Okay, thank you, Pamela. I hope I answered all your questions.
Pam, thanks for your call. We got to move on. We're going to head over to Lori in Alberta. She wants to talk about the state of things in Alberta. Lori, you're live with Dave Bjorkman.
Hi, Dave.
Lori.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
I just really I'm learning about what this separation would mean, and just going to ask, how long would something like this take? I think a lot of Albertans, and I'm sure maybe Dave, obviously you feel the same way, that we feel out of hope, out of... we're treated like dogs here, and we don't want to hand out. We want to hand up. That's the Alberta way. I'm born and raised here my whole life, and proud. I'm a proud Albertan, and then a Canadian, but a proud Albertan first.
Okay, I'm going to tell you the instant relief that I'm talking about. All things aside, end of equalization, end of carbon tax, end of GST, and I can't touch all 124 agreements. I have the ATB ready to go. I've secured every Canadian's pension plan, every single one in clear time. I spent 8.5 months on this to make sure it could be done. The only issue is CPP. It could be done in 5 working days, but because of the volume of money we're talking about, Albertans' percentage, and a lot are retired already, but I can move all your money, snap of the finger, but the large quantity of some of these plans takes a lot. But I present a 4-year transfer, and that's a negotiation in good faith with Ottawa. But we're going to end GST equalization. That's all coming back to Alberta. There is instant relief right there. As for pipelines, we need the UN on the 2021. I need that signed. If we could run here, I need 15 more MLA candidates. I need strong Albertans. I'm trying to get into Calgary. It's been tough there. Edmonton, we're making grounds. But of course, we've secured almost the entire rural Alberta. I hope that answered your question, or if it was enough for you.
Lori, thank you so much for your call. We've got 1 minute left. We've got to move on.
Keep
listening to Americanuck Radio, Lori. We'll have Dave back on for more Q&A on this subject. John Martin wants to talk about independence talks. John, you're live.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's really important that we get this going in the next 2 months, because if we don't, first of all, we're coming into a federal election, And it's going to be a much harder conversation if Trudeau's not the Prime Minister in 8 months. Secondly, if we don't get the 18 MLAs, this isn't even a conversation anymore.
Absolutely, John. I hear the music.
Thank you so much, John.
Yeah, and that was a good statement. I've got to let you go. We're at the end of the show. I can't believe how fast the time goes by. This is one of my favorite subjects to cover here on the show, and we're going to be doing more of it in the future. Americanuck Radio will become the voice of Alberta separation and the mouthpiece of the Alberta Independence Party. Everybody, thanks for listening. Big thanks to Dave Bjorkman and Ray Bolger for joining us. What a terrific 2 hours of radio. This is why I got into it. Everybody, enjoy your Saturday.
Radio.